So today I want to go over the witch build I've been using in Path of Exile 2, and this build is focused around fire damage and summoning fire minions that are also going to be dealing fire damage. So it's a bit of a mix of a caster and a summoner. Now keep in mind, I'm not in the end game of Path of Exile 2 yet. I'm actually really close to getting into it. I'm close to the end of the Cruel Axe. So keep that in mind. There's going to be a lot of iteration and optimization as I get into the end game, but this build has been pretty strong so far. I haven't really had much issues on any of the boss fights or getting through any of the areas so far. So it's been pretty strong. And I did end up taking Infernalist as my Ascension. Now I know a lot of people even into the end game haven't taken their Ascension yet, but if you know what you want to play on the Witch and you want to be an Infernalist, I would definitely recommend taking it. The first trial, the second miss is really easy. It's only after the first trial that the other trials become kind of ridiculous to play through. But when you first take this, you can go get your loyal Hellhound, which summons an Infernal Hound, which takes 20% of the damage you would take from hits and soaks it on them. And this thing actually does quite a lot of damage. Its melee hits pretty hard, and it just ignites everything around it, constantly dealing fire damage. And you also get 12% increased max life for all of your minions. So just going and getting that, which is pretty easy on the first one, is a lot of increased power. But that takes us over to our skills. And starting off, we have Skeleton Warrior. Now this is just going to be coming from our Scepter. We're not actually putting any spirit or anything into our Skeleton Warriors. These are primarily just because you can use the Scepter. You can get these free minions that are kind of primarily there just to soak damage. And I do have Ignition in it. I don't actually know if this works. I guess it should work to ignite things. Don't really have a problem with igniting things. I think I just put this here because I removed it from something else, but you really don't even need any support gems in these. They're kind of just there to be meat shields and deal some additional damage basically for free. Then we have the Summon Infernal Hound that we just went over. And then for our support gems on our Hound, we have Elemental Army, so it has more resistances, so it can just soak more damage from me. Then we have Fiery Death. So as they're hitting things that are ignited, which they will also be igniting things, and we have a lot of ignition, things can just start to blow up. And then we also have a Maim. So now anytime this thing basically just melees something, it'll maim them, primarily just because Maim slows things. I just want things slower so they're harder to chase me around. Then we go down, we have a Frost Wall. Now the only reason I'm taking this Frost Wall is because it's a physical object. You place down a physical Frost Wall and things can't go past it. It'll also block projectiles. This is pretty much just used so if there's a bunch of fast enemies that are trying to surround me, I can just ice wall them off, and hopefully my minions will either get them low health or kill them while they're blocked off by an ice wall. It's legitimately the only reason I'm using this. And then we have our kind of main spanned ability, which is Fireball. So Fireball, you just throw a fireball at something. Anytime it hits a wall or an enemy, it blows up and creates a bunch of smaller firebolts. In fact, it creates 8 smaller firebolts that can then bounce around and deal even more damage. And we've put a lot of upgrades into this. So first off, we have Unleash. This just builds up these seals. So in a little over 2 seconds, it'll give you a seal. You could stack up to 2 seals. And the next time you cast Fireball, every seal it has, it'll cast an additional fireball that deals less damage. So you're basically just casting more fireballs off of these seals. And those fireballs count as like normal fireballs. So they still go out, hit something, and create all of their fire bolts. And if you have proc chances for additional projectiles, these seals will also cast additional projectiles as well. So let's say we cast a fireball, it now has 3 because we use our 2 seals from Unleash, and then we like have a proc chance to cast 2 additional fireballs. All of the fireballs, including the ones from these seals, will cast additional fireballs. So you can just send out a massive spray of fireballs if you have a bunch of ways for additional projectiles. Then we have Ricochet. This just allows fireballs and the fire bolts, because they're also projectiles, to just kind of bounce around additional times. Now this is incredibly strong when you get in close quarter areas, even in some of the boss fights, because if you have walls around you, these things will just bounce around off enemies, off walls. And you'll see in some of the footage when I'm in enclosed areas, in close corridors, the amount of additional damage you do is absurd with this setup. Anytime you're indoors, close quarters, this thing is destroying everything. I pretty much just spam cast fireballs when in those situations. Then we have Scatter Shot, which just adds additional projectiles. It makes Fireball have less cast speed and deal less damage, but again, you're getting more projectiles, which is generally just going to be doing more damage overall. But also, we have a chance for additional projectiles, which we'll go over when we get into our passive tree, but that will also do additional projectiles after the Scatter Shot. So you can just do massive sprays of fireballs. That spray I just did was just a massive spray of fireballs, and I don't even know if that was the additional projectile procs. So you're just spraying out massive amounts of fireballs everywhere. I'm not sure if this is technically stronger than some other skills I could be using, but it's incredibly fun and looks really cool, I know for sure is ridiculously strong in close quarters. Then we have Flame Wall. This just puts down a flame wall. It ignites things, does a lot of damage, but projectiles that go through the flame wall deal a lot of additional damage. This is 27 to 38 additional damage. Keep in mind our base fireball damage is 81 to 122. So this is a massive damage increase, and all of our fireballs can go through it to do more damage. And I think the fire bolts from our fireballs can also go through it for more damage. So you're just putting down flame walls. It does damage by itself and improves all of our other projectiles. And for our support gems, we're using Fortress, so it turns it into a circle instead. It just makes it much easier to hit things with. And we're using Arcane Tempo, so it has increased attack speed. So you can just get your flame wall off much more quickly and worry about spamming more fireballs. Then we're going down to some of our additional summons. We're using most of our spirit on Skeletal Arsonist. These are just ranged skeletons that throw fire bombs at things. That's basically all they do, but they do a lot of damage. And their support gems, we're using Minion Mastery, so it gains +1 level to Skeletal Arsonist, just more damage. We have Execute, so they do more damage to low-life enemies, just more damage again. And then we have Magnified Effect, so their area of effect is larger and they throw fire bombs at our area of effect, so it's just easier for them to hit a lot more things. And then for a lot of the other spirit we're using, we have Raging Spirits. This only costs 30 spirit, but this is one of the buff skills you can get from spirit gems. And all this does is when we use any fire skill, it summons a bunch of these Raging Spirits. So they're basically flaming skulls and they run around and hit things. You can have 10 out at a time. And because this is so upgraded, you get 7 on a cast, but we're spamming fire casts anyway. So you're always going to have out 10 of these Raging Spirits, and they actually deal quite a lot of damage, especially when there's 10 of them hitting one thing. And the support gems we're using is Feeding Frenzy. They deal more damage, but take more damage. When I get another gem for Skeletal Arsonist, this will probably go into that, but it's so good for Raging Spirits. We have Fire Infusion, so they deal more fire damage, but less cold and lightning damage, which is fine. They primarily all do fire damage anyway. And then we have Infernal Legion. So Infernal Legion catches the minion on fire, so they constantly are taking a lot of their max health and fire damage, but they basically ignite everything around them for that damage they're taking as well. And this does seem to work on Raging Spirits because now they do catch everything on fire around them and it changes how they look a little bit. But if you actually go into their stats, it doesn't show you their health. So I don't actually know how much damage this ignition damage is actually doing, but these do get the increased max life just from our increased minion max life stats. So it seems like these have some hidden amount of health, and it seems to actually work with Infernal Legion, because if you put Infernal Legion on other summons, it just kills them incredibly quickly. Raging Spirits can't be hit by normal enemies, and they die off pretty quickly from their duration anyway, so it just seems like it's more free damage. And then finally, we have Flammability, which you curse enemies, reducing their fire resistance. That's all this does. Then we have Heightened Curse to increase its effect, so it's up to like 41% reduced fire resistance. And then we have Life Tap, so now this doesn't cost mana, it costs life. And I would recommend doing that because this costs a lot of mana. This spell is currently costing, it says 130 mana, but I think it was actually more like 190 mana. And keep in mind, a fireball is only 50 mana. So if you were trying to use Flammability with a mana cost, with also putting down your flame walls constantly, with also spamming fireballs, you would usually run out of mana. So the life cost is actually quite a bit better than mana. Now our passive tree is an area that I've just kind of been throwing in points a little bit. I have been trying to optimize it a bit more, but we're just going through getting like any minion damage, any spell damage we can get. We're getting some max energy shield increases. I've been going much more into energy shield. We went up here, we got all of these fire increases, so we penetrate fire resistance for breath of fire. We went over here, so we do more damage to enemies with elemental ailments on them, which we pretty much just always have things ignited, so this is just more damage. We went over here to get our minions resurrecting faster and also give them more resistances. We went around this big circle here, which just gives us increased energy shield, gives us more energy shield off of our helmet as well. Then we went over here to the right, we took up our increased spell damage a bit, which is actually a lot of increased damage from this one section. But then we went over, we got our minions a lot more tanky through max life and regen. We gave them increased move speed and attack speed, some increased accuracy. Then we went over here, and this is where we went and got additional possible projectiles. So it was a 4% chance, 6%, 4%, 6%, and then 12. So all added up, it's a little over a 30% chance for additional projectiles. And this is how we basically just spray out tons of projectiles, because we have so many built-in projectiles on our fireball that doing 2 more on top of that actually adds a lot more than 2. And that's pretty much majority of the points we've been going into. Most of it is kind of self-explanatory. You're getting more energy shield, you're buffing up your minions, you're getting more spell damage, and then we went into additional projectiles. So it's been pretty simple so far. It's been working for me. I'm sure there's a lot of ways to optimize this, a lot more than I've been doing. Been working decently well for me so far. Now, because of how stingy Path of Exile 2 is with loot, you're kind of just going to go for whatever you can get. I've mainly been using just a one-handed wand. I could probably get something a lot better because I'm not even using the skill on this, but the scepter you're using, you definitely want it for just the free skeletons. And then for a lot of my other gear, I've been going a lot more into energy shield. So a lot of energy shield here, a lot of energy shield here, and then get as many resistances as you can pretty much anywhere, but just tons of energy shield here, getting some more defensives around here. It's pretty much, I've just been trying to go into like intellect, energy shield, and getting like more resistances or defensives anywhere I can possibly get them. I also do have a decent bit of increased max mana, but outside of just going into everything we just went into, if you can get anything with spirit on it, that's going to be the main thing you want. If you can get a necklace with spirit like I have here, you can get the scepter that already has spirit on it, but you can also get a percentage increase to spirit as well, like I have a rule on this, because the more spirit you can get, the more minions you can have. You could also go into and get another buff from the spirit gems. Some of them are pretty good. Some of them give you a lot more defensives, and they only cost 30 for the first tier of those and 60 for the second. So if you can get a lot more spirit again, you can just get more minions, or you can just get some more buffs to give you a lot more utility or defensives. But outside of that, primarily right now, just go into whatever sounds smart. Like I mentioned, energy shield, max life, intellect, resistances, all that type of stuff. If you can get spell damage or fire spell damage, any of that type of stuff, anything that sounds like it's going to be good for this build is going to be good for the build. But that's pretty much the entirety of the witch build I've been using so far. Again, I'm not into the end game yet, but I haven't really gotten blocked or had a difficult time on any of the bosses so far, even in the cruel axe. So this build has been really good. I'm curious to see how good it is when going into the end game and what type of optimizations or changes I need once I get into the end game. But it's been really cool. I really like the massive sprays of fireballs I get to do that then spray out firebolts everywhere, and then we just have fire minions everywhere. So it's been a pretty cool build to play as well. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.
Yes, another one. He's under there.
He's even more
First ones, here are...
What a delightfully sacrilegious creature.